You are always practicing something. The question is, what are you practicing? Unknown martial arts sensei.
Welcome to the Instinctive Influencers podcast, a show where influence becomes one of your tools for success. Now, here are your hosts, Brian Weber and Ed Haley.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I am Ed.
And this is the Instinctive Influencers podcast. Ed, how is life?
It's a good day any day that you get to have the day off. And it's just me and Poodle time today. So it's going to be a good day.
That's what I'm talking about, man. Hey, I'll tell you, I do love, having days off every once in a while. I mean, sometimes it's nice being a workaholic, but then there's those days where you're just like, just relax, kind of do what you want.
So I have a captain that I work with, and he's very much a workaholic. He's very smart, but he just works and works. And mysteriously yesterday, honestly, I have never seen this, but he got a message that there were no drivers to support his ID card in the computer. And today's a holiday, so the ID card section is closed, so he is unable to work all weekend. He's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I said, oh, here's a radical idea, man. Go home and enjoy your family for the weekend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that sounds good. I said, there you go. So I told him, I'm very happy your ID card did that. I don't know why it did it, but I'm happy about it.
That's forced karma right there, my man. That's something saying, hey, you need to take a break.
Yeah, I don't understand, man. So I got it, mission, but sometimes these guys, they get in their work and so much, and then sometimes it's stuff that's not that urgent. And I don't know, maybe my wife is just super understanding, but I learned a long time ago as a young leader, I did used to put in a lot of hours that, looking back now, I'm like, that was so unnecessary to take time away from my family to do whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think that's part of our development, our growth, though. Like, it's something that we get over the years of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You start looking at things differently too, Ed. For instance, you think about it. You take your time off and you think about how you use your time off now versus, let's say 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ago, how you did it then. It's I guarantee it's completely different. I know mine is.
20 years ago, I'm pretty sure I'd have been in a drunken stupor by now, by 11:52 a.m. on a day off 20 years ago. I'd have definitely already been working on it. So, yeah, no, it's way different now. Now, you've been to the gym, you've got a workout in, and, I'm here recording this episode, and so much more focused on other things that are good. Like, what was the advantage of being drunk by noon? Nothing, but I was super young and easily influenced by those around me.
Yeah. And that's it, man. It's just looking at things and saying, all right, no, I've got to learn to press forward on some, on life and stop doing some of the childish things that we do. And hey, listen, I probably did the same thing, my man. But now I look at it and it's like, well, I can do this and waste everything. Or I can do this, and this, enjoy it, and be productive. So, like tomorrow,
yeah,
I'm myself and a guy that I work with. We're gonna go hit this awesome Korean trail. It's they have a lot of bicycle trails here. We're gonna go hit this. It's a 90-mile trek, man, and I'm pretty stoked because they have this program here. So you go and get it's like a bicycle passport is what it's called. But what it is it has like all these different pages with different routes that you can take, and you go to that route, you ride the route, and along the route there's these red booths that you get a stamp, and you get the stamp for riding that route. And once you basically, with each different route or like longer segments of route with many routes included, you get like medals and stuff like that. So we're pretty stoked. This is our first big ride with that little passport book. The crazy thing, man, check this out. The crazy thing is we are using like 4 or 5 different apps to like figure stuff out. because we can't read any of the Korean language on the map that we have. So we spent lunch today.
Oh.
We're sitting at lunch trying to discuss our route and stuff, and he's like, I don't know what this says. And I'm like, I don't either. And he has this like Google Translate out, and I've got mine out, and his is working, mine's not working. I'm like, so now all I'm doing is I'm pulling up regular maps that have English on it, and I'm trying to compare the roads to figure out exactly where I am. Terrain association. And then finally I'm like, oh, we got to go right here. So I drop a pin, and then we drop a pin. But it was, it was a way to kind of also figure out something that was difficult before, and we learned from it, and basically now I know that if when we go to do the next one, okay, this is how we're going to do it, and it's going to help us grow, as we go along, which kind of leads me into the topic today. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I thought you were going right at it too. I was like, okay, I can kind of see where Brian's going today.
Yeah. So, hey, audience, this is what we're getting at today. We pulled another one from the Green Notebook website. A great article, really good article, actually. And it makes you kind of think about it. Ed earlier, he read that quote. It was from an unknown sensei, and it being, you're always practicing, but what is it that you are practicing? And Ed, you know what I thought of when you was reading that? It just bing popped in my mind. Do you know what I thought of?
No, I had no idea.
It's a phrase that you use almost every episode, and you love using it.
So you were comparing my quote that I read,
yeah,
to lifelong learning.
Absolutely, and that's what it all boils down to, man. It really does. So we could actually we could call this deliberate lifelong learning, or we can actually use the title that the author has. This is written by David Wirt. And it's shared across the From a Green Notebook, but it's called Developing Deliberate Practices for Leadership Growth. I mean, you could pretty much, same thing in a sense, if you think about it. So crazy thing here. That particular quote, it challenges leaders to reflect on how their actions and behaviors contribute to their leadership narrative. Have you ever actually sat there and thought about your actual leadership narrative, Ed?
No, I remember we had a sergeant major. What was that sergeant major's name right before we left? I can't remember his name.
Mancini?
Yes. Yeah, he wanted us to develop our leadership philosophy. And that's as close as I've come to thinking about what my narrative is developing a leadership philosophy.
Okay. I mean, and I think it's along the same lines. So philosophy is kind of like how you see leadership should be, and in your narrative is kind of how you're tailoring your leadership to be.
Yeah.
So you could compare the two, and the two could work together. Absolutely. One of the things there that they actually go into in this article that really catches my eyes, and it just makes me think about all the different classes we've done through leadership. This is what the author says: everything a leader does, from the constructive actions of vision setting, decision making, and resolving conflicts, to destructive acts such as lacking empathy and micromanaging, serve as indicators to the quality of their leadership practice. That says a lot if you think about it. It almost kind of reminds me also of the you often lead the way you were led type scenario. You think about a lot of the different people you've dealt with, right, Ed? And you monitor how they lead, and then you question, maybe, possibly. I don't know if you do. That's what I'm going to ask you. Do you question where they learned that from?
Yeah, sometimes. And sometimes you can see it. So if you're in an organization and maybe they came up as a leader through there, you can see kind of, did you ever work for him? Because you're very similar. And they're like, oh, yeah, that was my first, my first squad leader or whatever. So you can pick up on some of those tendencies along the way. But one of the biggest things I learned super early was, bad leaders are great examples, because you take those principles from them and say, I'm not going to be this guy either. And those are the ones I really go, where did he learn that was okay? So just kind of, you observe it, and you do wonder where it come from. And right now here where I'm at now, I've been fortunate that one of the people that mentored me, his mentor is here as a civilian, and we've connected those dots. So now I kind of get to see, okay, now I see why he was like this with me, because I see it in you.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think I've mentioned before, my wife actually works for the guy, so we can see those tendencies. It's kind of interesting, actually. It's fascinating.
It almost sounds like a lineage of leadership. You could probably call that a show.
It probably could be a show.
Yeah.
And we see it a lot in the military.
Oh yeah. You do, and that's what I said. Like, I've watched people in their interactions, and because you've often said, yellers, screamers, those type of people that are really negative and derogatory towards others. You think to yourself, was that an upbringing, or was that like in a home setting, like as a child and all that stuff, or was that how they were led when, years before, and they just picked that up because they thought that's what worked, or that's how you're supposed to do it, instead of maybe stepping back and saying, okay, let me evaluate this. Why is it that he's acting this way? Can he not handle stress and he just has to blow up all the time? Can he not, or she not, make deliberate decisions, so they have to constantly go seek advice from their leaders and actually seek for their actual answer because they can't come up with their own? I mean, it's things like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and so for me, I was fortunate because I was in the military in 1991, and then I came back in the military in 2002, and the senior leaders in 2002 were my peers, in 91. And when you see how they lead, and the yellers and the screamers, originally I was just like, yeah, that's the norm. And then I realized, wow, the Army has changed. That's not the norm. That was the norm in 1991, 95, but it's not the norm now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that was one of the things that I was fortunate with, that gap in my service. It was generational leadership to me, that I observed. And now here we are, 2019, and it's not the same type of leadership of 2002. What was done in 2002 isn't acceptable now, and what was done in 1991 is now called hazing and will get you put out the military. So it's very generational.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were talking about that, because you're talking about generational and that stuff. So yesterday I held an NCOPD with a good majority of my NCOs who could make it to it, and it was ethical leadership was the title. And I actually pulled some of the material from Mind Tool, it's called. It's a real good website. There's a lot of information on there. And I pulled some other material from some other places and kind of pushed together. I used the material to create my questions, because how I went about it was I wrote 13 different cards, note cards, and I wrote like a question or something on it, and I just handed them out randomly as people were kind of getting settled in and whatnot. And then I just go, all right, who has, number one? And so they would read it off, and we would kind of go through it. But as we were going through, one of the older NCOs within it was referencing what was going on as, well, this is how you do it in the new Army, but in the old Army, blah, blah, blah. And I really respected one of my young staff sergeants who spoke up, and he said, but really it's nothing about the old Army and the new Army. It's still the same Army. It's just new rules took place, so we had to make changes. It's still the same Army. And I was like, man, I really respected that, because he's showing a growth himself by analyzing what's being said and then speaking what needed to be said during a leadership development period, So I know, to me, I think about these things. Those are the types of things that kind of help me analyze as a leader myself and say, okay, yeah, this is the direction I want to go. This is the direction I don't want to go. And also, when we look at this article, he quotes Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is a well-known management guru. Like, he is like one of those ones that he's done plenty of books and he's referenced tons, and he's just got a lot of good ideas. He's a lot like Maxwell too. But here that he writes, demands doing certain and fairly simple things. It consists of a small number of practices. Applying creative liberty by swapping out management for leadership. Drucker's adage still applies. If practicing leadership is vital to becoming an effective leader, the questions to answer then become, what types of practices and how do I practice? And sometimes that's what we don't know, Ed. If you think about it, like, you just don't know what you should be practicing. because repetition creates habit, and then habits formed, and then you're able to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So for me, I've never really thought about practicing leadership. You know what I mean? Um, so that I found this article super interesting because of that. I don't know. Maybe I just think of leadership as something you learn through. It's like experiential learning, and I don't know. Maybe I have been practicing and I'm just unaware of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, too. You think about with, let's say you're wanting to engage people in certain types of conversation. If you don't at least try it, you don't know how it's going to work. And then over time, you keep trying it, but you maybe change a little bit here, you change a little bit there. I kind of see that as a practice to fine tune what you're going for, right? Whether it be how you're counseling people, how you're going over some legal issues with someone, maybe how you're teaching them how to properly, I don't know, deal with contracts as a government official and between two civilian officials. Who knows? I mean, those types of things. It's like you're constantly, how many times do you think, Ed, that you've gone back in your mind and you thought about a conversation, you replayed it and you thought, oh, I should have said this. I probably could have said this or this. You know what I'm saying?
So yeah, you do, because I mean every interaction to me is an opportunity to learn something. So you replay those conversations, and when you're replaying them, you may find something that you're like, oh, I really should have said this. Or for me, I think that as you develop with your creative and critical thinking skills, those also come into play, because as I'm playing it back, it's easy to say, oh, I really missed an opportunity to make a valid point here, or to say this or whatever. So I just think any interaction really, you have an opportunity to learn, and you play it back, and then moving forward, you may remember that moment, and now you'll say what you thought you should have said then. So I mean, in meetings and things like that, I see that quite a bit, and I do that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And you'll sometimes you'll find yourself doing it deliberately, and that kind of falls right into the next part that we're going to talk about, where research into the science of expert level performance provide military leaders of all experience levels and positions insight into how top athletes, chess prodigies, musicians, and surgeons develop world-class skills in their professions. Simply put, expert achievers practice their skill differently. They establish a deliberate practice. While the research behind deliberate practice study of experts and coined as 10,000 rule featured by Malcolm Gladwell's Outliners focus primarily on vocations outside of the military, the principles are applicable to our profession, basically any profession. And it's finding how to deliberately practice something. I can tell you there's tons of things that we do in the Army that we deliberately practice to create that muscle memory, but you never really think about doing it leadership-wise. Well, sometimes it could be just how you conduct a meeting. It could be how you get the right vocal pitch if you're in front of a formation to ensure that everyone hears you. I mean, when we do PRT, physical readiness training, Ed, we have to deliberately practice that to lead them. Now, we're conducting an action, but when we're using our voice and then our movements, and we need people to mimic us, and we have to lead them along, we deliberately practice that. So I find that studying athletes and chess prodigies, maybe, musicians, especially musicians, doing deliberate practices could be one of those things that really helps make you a little bit better.
Deliberate practice definitely pays. We learned this. This dude and his plugs. We learned this from the bearded ninja, though. Like I told you one time when I first started going to work with him, he's about to teach a class to all of us that were assigned to the academy. And I walk into my office and I can see our classroom, and he was in there teaching. And I'm like, who is he talking to? And he was talking to the chairs. He was deliberately making sure. And he even goes through the motions enough to say, you have a question, Mr. Chair? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he deliberately practiced every and then when he would respond as if the chair, because we're supposed to respond to a correct answer, he would say, "That's absolutely correct. That's a good point, Mr. Chair." Like, but that deliberate practice, and then when he gets in front of us, we all had him on this pedestal as an instructor because he was so good. But
Yeah.
it's the same thing with leadership, right? If we practice, then we get on these pedestals. We practice, especially the one that I find that now going into this episode, decision making. Like initially, you made a lot of decisions. At least I know I did, with heat of the moment decisions, not thought out at all. Right, and boom, sometimes the right, sometimes the wrong. But over time and practice at dealing with soldiers and their problems and their issues, your muscle memory comes into play and you start making better decisions based off of past experiences, which is really your practice, right? So I know I did this the last time and it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? Well, I didn't get the 5 W's from the soldier before I went to first sergeant with the problem. Now I'm going to get the 5 W's. Get the 5 W's, go to first sergeant. Now I can lay everything out. Now I've learned something. And it was really through the practice of leadership.
Yeah.
So I think really in decision making, that's where we really see it in what we do as non-commissioned officers in the military.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I talked earlier. I spoke earlier about NCODP or NCOPD. People call it all kinds of things. Basically, NCO professional development or development of professionals. But what we do these things is we get together and I like to have them as more of like a discussion. I bring up topics and I let them discuss it because I feel like, we can, just like in how we used to train, we do the concrete experience and the PMP, which is published in process. And then there's the general new information. I like to kind of mix all that in like we were doing before and like put out a topic out there and kind of start just like pinging questions to get people to start generating conversation and to create that dialogue of thought and I'm telling you, like, it really does work. I mean, I've done it every month since I've been here, held at least one. And every time it really, I watch and I listen to them. And I guarantee you, some of the ones that are sitting there just kind of being quiet, I feel like they're gaining some of that knowledge. And sometimes there's a couple that I've seen, they never said anything in the beginning, but now they're starting to vocalize things. And it's really nice because I think what they were doing is they may have been like deliberately practicing in their mind how they would answer something or this or just, I mean, there could be lots of things. I can't say for sure, but it's really cool to kind of see that it's like the fruit is starting to ripen there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then those ones you talk about being quiet, well, I mean, generally, that's probably because they're uncertain or unconfident, and over time, they develop that confidence, and then they'll get out there and get more, more outgoing, more involved in discussions, and for us as leaders, that's up to us to capture that moment.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the deliberately practicing leader seeks out opportunities for professional development outside of what their organization's programs or institutional educational requirements. They embrace the challenge inherent in conducting deliberate practice by going outside of their comfort zones and setting stretch goals to attain new skills and competencies. So our author here basically is saying, hey, listen, those who are seeking outside resources constantly and looking outside and basically trying to gain new knowledge, obviously they're still getting it from inside, but they're also outside. They are deliberately practicing leadership. That's what they're doing. When you read a new book, when you watch a new video, we're doing things, and we're going to get into the book thing here in a little bit, but we're doing all these different things, and you're seeking the people listening to this show right now. If they're listening, they're deliberately.
What about the host of this show?
Well, definitely you. I don't know about me. No, yes, definitely both of us. Because the funny thing is
the host of this show.
We are deliberately practicing leadership or influence, either way you want to go it. Because I mean, not only are we having the conversation, Ed, we're doing the research on these topics. We read through it, we discuss it. I mean, and if you think on top of that, before the show even starts, Ed, we constantly are kind of jibber jabbing back and forth, kind of going over what happened, what's happened this week and whatnot. And we're learning from each other. Like, I was asking you certain questions about different things that were going on that you had going, and then you kind of revert and ask me. And obviously, we ask the questions not to just ask a question because that's the thing to do, but instead we ask the question because we're trying to learn something, So, yeah, man,
I like
definitely.
it a lot.
Deliberate practicing of leadership. That's definitely it. Well, where do we begin? Where do we begin with this whole deliberate practicing of leadership? Well, this is what I can definitely tell you. Military leaders, they consist of basically three components when we try to use deliberate practices in leadership, and it's pretty simple: assessing, training, and then learning / reflecting through feedback. Right. So we assess what's going on, we do the training needed to be done because of the assessment, and then we learn what from that training, and then reflecting through the feedback. You want to cover a little bit about this? The foundational component of deliberate assessment requires.
Yeah, so it requires a deep appraisal of your attributes and competencies as a leader, and setting a focused stretch goal intended to improve on a specific aspect of your capacity as a leader. And then he goes on to talk about the multi-source assessment feedback tool that we use in the military, and there's civilian equivalents of this. And actually, I don't think we're using this anymore, which is really crazy to me because I thought it was a valuable, very valuable tool. I've actually had people who were my raiders have me fill these out to kind of help me frame how I was seen, because when you do that, and I know you've done them, you get feedback from your peers, your subordinates, and your leaders. In fact, I'm sure you filled this out on me more than once.
I probably have. Not sure.
So, and that helps you assess where you are as a leader. So that's a very, very valuable tool. And I don't know the civilian equivalents of it, but I know there are some out there.
Oh yeah, and let's back up a second too, Ed, because you hit upon two phrases there: attributes and competencies. And this is the thing, we talked about it often with our Joes when we would train them.
Yep.
But it's like, do people really think about these things too? And I think these same attributes and competencies would work even in the civilian sector. I really do. I think because, all right, we'll break it down real quick. So attributes. These are the attributes you need to have. This is what we consider in the Army. As a non-commissioned officer, you're actually rated on these areas. You're rated on your attributes and you're rated on your competencies. So attributes: character, presence, and intellect. Those are the attributes. Now, there's other stuff that breaks down underneath those, right? Then you're also rated, and when I say rated, basically we get an evaluation. You get them yearly, or you may get them every time you move to new duty stations. At a minimum, you at least get them yearly, right?
Right.
But it's kind of like our report card. Now, let's talk about the competencies. Competencies: leads, develops, and achieves. Those 6 areas are what our NCOs are rated on. But if you think about it, if you built a rating system that revolved around those, I definitely think it would work. Now, you may have to fill in some of the subcategories underneath those, but I really believe that would work. Wouldn't you say that, Ed?
Yeah, you can. Honestly, so Brian, I actually was thinking, looking at these. So when we look at attributes and competencies, right, they're all part of what we call the Army leadership model. And I looked at those and I said, man, these could be episodes. We would just have to play with the verbiage a little bit to, transition them to the civilian sector. But honestly, so when you look at the competency of achieves, the subcategories gets results. Okay, I'm pretty sure they do that in the civilian sector. I don't think it's just us. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Even if, all right, so look at the attribute of presence. The first one is military and professional bearing. Okay, well, let's take out military and just say professional bearing. Sounds civilian sector to me.
Exactly.
I don't know. It's been a little while. So there are things. I mean, intellect, mental agility. Well, we all need that. We need that in our personal lives, not just our professional lives. So definitely those subcategories could be transition into a civilian sector, I don't see one on here that I couldn't say, all right, that's got to be strictly military. You know what I mean? Like Army values. Okay, values. Too easy, right?
Oh yeah. You know what though? This is my deal, and we see it in the Army. We see people's feelings get hurt when they are rated in, say, presence, and they get a poor rating. I think maybe that's an issue. That could be considered an issue. I'm not sure, because feelings get hurt easily because obviously they didn't show enough confidence. Well, yeah, I didn't show them confidence because you didn't give me. Well, no, I shouldn't give you anything. You need to come after it. Come get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Come and get what you want. If you want that new position, then go get it. If you want to be a better leader, then you need to do the deliberate leadership growth so you can get it. And when I look at it, man, I think of, if you can't do this yourself, you're probably wanting a handout. That's the kind of thing I get in my mind. And I'm starting to sound like I'm on a soapbox, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But it's just, I'm one of those individuals, man, that I really believe that, and it said it earlier during this article, he's talking about it's the people that go outside of the box to learn more, to become better. And it works more than just leadership. It works for anything. You know, if I want to be a better cyclist, I have to go and push beyond my limits. If I want to be a better weightlifter, I have to start pushing heavier weights. If I want to be a better reader, yeah, you like that. If I want to be a better reader, I have to read more books. You know, it's not like I could just like, you know what? I really want to be a really good reader. Oh, well, I guess I am one now. No, come on, man. Come on. Yeah. So... but that's what I'm getting at, So I look at them, and I don't like to sit there and like disappoint someone when I'm doing their NCOR or whatever. But at the same time, I've got to tell the truth. I have to be honest.
Yes.
I think that's part of my deliberate leadership development and growth. I feel like that helps me become a better, honest broker. I mean, you think about it, right? We're just going to I'm just going to jump right into the evaluation thing. Now, to get the top block or be considered a number one type of person, they've actually forced it so the one who's doing the senior rating can only give up a certain percentage of it. So now only 24% of individuals being rated by that person could be a top blocker type of person. So now you got to work a little bit harder. But I would take it even further, Ed. I would say this, because there's 4 different levels. You have, what's that? Most qualified, highly qualified, qualified, and then not qualified.
Yeah.
This is the way I see it. I think you take 100%, right? You take a percentage of 100%. 100%, you took 24% out already, because that's the most qualified. So now you're down to 76%. Well, I say you take another 26% for the highly qualified, right? And now everyone else, the other 50%, they get qualified straight up,
or worse.
Now or worse if they do something that would result in unqualified, obviously, because there's certain stipulations to receive that also. But if you basically made it to where that had to happen, ooh, man, now you're really going to find that cream of the crop, I think. Because are you going to waste a highly qualified on somebody who's really not a highly qualified? So you got to pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah, no.
That's just, to me, that's part of leadership development, man.
And that honest broker aspect is one of the big things too. I mean, that's why we went to a newer system in our profession, is because everybody was, among the best, but there's absolutely no way that so many people were the best in the Army. So they had to get that's where the 24% comes from. Oh no, we need to limit this. Now, Is it always going to work out? No, because it is possible that if I can only give 24% the top block, I may have more than 24% who deserve it. It could be a fluke thing, could be the number of people I have, what have you. But so it could. But yeah, no, that's why we had to go to that, because people didn't want to be honest brokers, and they were saying everybody was among the best. So
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's the other thing, man. It's people will get their feelings so hurt. And the crazy thing is on the flip side, the people who are doing the ratings themselves, they'll look at you and be like, well, man, I don't want to hurt their career. I'm sorry. Did you make their choices for them, or did they make their choices for them? Allow that to take place. Allow them to allow for that decentralized command that we often talk about, that we've heard Jocko mention many times, that you and I both have, we're paid subscribers to that idea. I mean, straight up.
yeah.
I subscribed all day to that extreme ownership and decentralized command. We'll allow that to happen. And then when they make the right choices, you reward. When they make the wrong choices, well, we go back to the drawing board, we retrain. And then if they make the wrong choices again, well, now we have a problem, because we've retrained them and now they can't do what needs to be done. All right. So now, are they really a top block type person? No, absolutely not. You mentioned earlier the multi-source assessment feedback. To me, you were right on with that. That was a great tool that was used. And I think it is still out there. It's just not used as much anymore. It's not publicized. But that is a great tool to really try to gain some feedback to understand where you stand, right? Then again, people will often worry, well, my soldiers are such and such people, they don't like me. Well, I got you. But you got to try at least. And is there a reason why they don't like you? Is it because, when you bring somebody bad news, are you really like on a butthead about it? Or do you bring them, if there's bad news, do you empathize with them? Are you just showing nothing but apathy? I mean, it's those types of things, man. He even says solicited feedback. I'm asking you. So remember earlier when we talked, I want to say it was not too long ago, we had the conversation I mentioned about my commander and I, we had a command climate survey going on, right? And those command climate surveys, they can be useful if people participate. We had a good large number to participate. I mean, it was a decent sized number. They can't be forced to, so it's all voluntary. But I would tell you that I was really impressed with some of the comments on there. Actually, many of the comments. And it was straightforward. It was, I'm going to tell you how it is type attitude, but it wasn't in a manner that it literally would try to break us type situation or try to make us seem like we're a horrible group of people. No, hey, we like what's going on here. We see this. We've never had this done, and we want this. I mean, let's put it this way. As soon as I'll tell you what, I'm really fortunate to have the commander I do. He's a great guy, really good man. As soon as he saw a couple things on there, he was already popping on that stuff, because when we had the conversation, man, he and I talked about how we're going to try to, tackle this beast with whatever feedback we got. He literally followed through that, and it was awesome. So I can definitely tell you, taking that feedback and using it to help provide leaders with the understanding of the current capabilities. Come on. He's writing it. He writes it right there. That helps us understand and then allows us to move forward as leaders. So was there more in that area that you wanted to hit upon?
No, man, your points were excellent, and of course, a good relationship with your commander is always that's invaluable. Yeah. That just makes everything so much better. So,
absolutely,
yeah. No, you made some very good points on this one, Brian. I think we're ready to move on.
Yeah. So he further goes on. He's talking here as the stretch goal is selected. So we talked about. Did we talk about the stretch goal? No, we didn't. All right. As gaps and areas of potential growth are identified, the leader sets her stretch goal and development plan focused on improving their current weakness. Could you pick out a weakness right now for you, Ed, do you think, as a leader?
Yes, and it's been the same, and I have worked on it a little bit, and I've gotten a lot better, but it's a strength and a weakness. So when I did the the MSAF, when I did it, right, the multi-source assessment and feedback tool, my top strength and weakness was my candor. So
really?
Yes, I had both. And it was really weird. I was like, oh, okay. So I have worked on that, but I would still call it a weakness. Sometimes I just say what I think and what I feel, and and sometimes there's time and place for everything, as we've always heard. And so I try to balance that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Especially I work in a very senior heavy environment. So I really try to keep some of my thoughts to myself. Uh and or find a different way to express them. Not necessarily hide them, but find a different way to express them more professionally.
Yeah. I would definitely tell you, it's funny. I think doing that whole Kevin Cruz book, Great Leaders Have No Rules, I really feel like that kind of opened a doorway for me of a weakness that I knew I had. I just didn't know how to fix it. And really, it all falls into the crowd your calendar, Ed. That's what it is. I can just get things done, right? I can multitask and like push, but I felt like I was being ineffective. It wasn't efficiency enough for me, like a battle rhythm enough. And I'm still struggling. Like I'm doing the crowd your calendar thing. I really am. I'm using it to a certain extent, but sometimes I'll allow myself to get unfocused from it. And recently we did some training and whatnot, and I completely had to get away from it because of the training, because I was in a different scenario, different situation, all kinds of stuff. Then went back to normal, and I'm trying to get back in that battle rhythm again. So it's understanding how to use it at the right times, and then how do I transform it? How do I basically translate it to a different type of mission set, right? Because I'm not maybe in my office area or around my company area or around, the area of operation of all the different platoons and sections, right? So it can be daunting sometimes, and it felt like it. I think I'm getting back to it, but I definitely could say that I'm appreciative of it because it's giving me focus. But right here, it talks about the strengths-based leadership movement. Developing expertise involves deliberate and prolonged practice directed at overcoming skill weakness and not building on one's strengths. When I read that previously, it made me think about exactly what I was talking about. It makes me think about what you're talking about with your weaknesses, is how we try to find certain keys to help us develop those particular weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be able to recognize it. And I'm telling you, when I first got that assessment, I really did. I'd say something, I'd be like, oh, now I see. I got it. But at the same time, subordinates appreciate not sugarcoating. So it's such a delicate balance, man. But I mean, I practice it every day, probably. Because sometimes, yeah, you just want to blurt whatever, and it's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't say it like that. Let me think of a better way.
Yeah.
And so it's challenging. It is. And another way, and that's when I first started really taking an interest in reading some of these, business related books, is to try to improve on that. I thought that would be a good way to improve on it, is to learn some other techniques or some other thoughts on it. So it's an ongoing thing. Like I learn every day something. At least I hope I do.
Right. And that's the thing. It's kind of like what he's talking about right here. By actively focusing on one aspect of your leadership practice in a time-bound window, the leader experiments with different actions and behaviors that yield effective results. Mm-hmm. That right there, like for instance, and that's what I was getting to earlier, and it's kind of on the same sheet of music you're talking about. It's like basically selecting a certain amount of time to practice it and actually use it. So just like the crowd your calendar, I practiced it. I was using it steadily up until that particular training thing I had to go take care of. But it was kind of cool because it allowed me to see things and be like, okay, this is where I'm wasting this time. This is where I'm wasting this time. I could actually squeeze this project or this little thing down in this time and use more time over here for this. And it really helped. I mean, and it helps you kind of see it. But he says how it's about time-bound window. So you're basically saying, I'm going to practice this between this period and this period. Now, it could be time of day. It could be time-bound window. It could be like, okay, I'm giving myself 3 weeks. I'm giving myself 1 month. So basically it's a time period that you're allowing yourself for it,
Yeah, and so same thing with the crowd your calendar, right? Like I'm going to crowd my calendar and I'm going to see if it works. Because at first, as we know with the Kevin Cruz books, like it goes against a lot of stuff we were taught. So we crowd our calendar and we say, okay, I'm going to give this 60 days to see if it works. So we just gave that time, that time block to it, right? And then we see it works and then we move on from there. And it's the same thing with anything else. Okay, I'm going to try this for this much time. We're going to make this work. I have a positive, mindset on it. And that's how we're deliberately practicing something to better our leadership.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I didn't notice in this article, Ed, was the time period. And it's not like it doesn't say, okay, we should try to do it for this amount of time, or you should try to do it for this amount of time. Well, they say you need to do things for, I want to say I read it. I can't remember where I read it, but you want to do things for about a solid 30 days, and then it becomes more of a habit type thing. So with the crowd your calendar, I literally, and maybe I did it wrong. I hope I didn't. I crowded it, and I created these recurring events to almost create like a battle rhythm that I can obviously go back to and look at and say, okay, I'm supposed to do this now. Okay, I'm supposed to do this now today. And I pushed it all the way through my time here in Korea. I literally, basically all that stuff ends when I leave here type thing. So basically it's kind of like I'm doing this practice of how to do this all the way up through. And then hopefully, I would hope by the time I'm done here, because obviously I just started doing it not too long ago. Around the time right after we read the book, I actually started actively putting it to play. But I would think that's almost like 6 months. So then 6 months,
yeah, it's
hopefully.
Been a while. Yeah, man, already. Wow.
Yeah, I've already gone through 6 months. I'm about to go through 6 more months, and then I'm done. But that's what I'm getting at is, hopefully it'll take play. And that's where he's going at with this article. It's like creating that little window. And it may be little, maybe big, but me, I'm one of those people there. Hey, I've been doing things like this for 20-something years almost. So it's going to take at least 6 months to create a good habit,
Yeah, no, it does. And I mean, I guess you're in a good environment for that because you have the calendar built for you, really, right? Like, hey, I have 12 months and then I'll probably take my midterm at 6 months. And so you have that calendar already built for you to kind of keep track. So I think that's kind of it is a positive to being where you are.
Yeah. Actually, by the time this episode comes out, I've already taken that mid-tour, went home for about a month, and came back. So I'll let you know how Disney World it was when I got there. All right, so he goes a little bit further here, Ed. Talks about as the stretch goal is selected. So that stretch goal, when we think back, that was that I'm wanting to develop a weakness into a strength. To improve the current weakness, I'm trying to improve it. So that's what the stretch goal is. I'm trying to improve that. The deliberately practiced leader develops a training plan consisting of studying and enacting the desired skills and competencies. Studying includes both self-examination and subject matter studying. Deep self-study promotes reflecting on personal values, worldview, and identity as a leader. So let's stop right there. It talks about reflecting on personal values. How many times have we talked about values on this show, Ed?
Because they're so important. We've talked about it numerous times.
Yeah. We just last episode, we brought up values again, right? So we go over it all the time. So obviously that is one of those key elements that helps people develop into better leaders. And then we talk about worldview. Now, worldview, I mean, that's a broad subject because there's so much incorporated in worldview. So I think really what you have to do is you kind of have to start segmenting down to what particular area of worldview you're wanting to. Could it be goat herding, or could it be stocks and markets and whatnot, or could it be and all kinds of things. But when we talk about worldviews as leaders, maybe we're looking at different types of leaders in different areas of the world and taking their positives and learning from their negatives. So, I mean, there could be all kinds of things. So that one could be tough. And then identify as a leader. Deep study or deep self-study promotes reflecting on identify as a leader. So that one right there, you think about identify as a leader. I wonder how many people don't actually identify themselves as a leader. Or they say to themselves, well, I'm not really a leader. I'm just somebody here working. But they're actually a leader. And they don't realize that they're probably an informal leader. What do you got there?
Yeah. So first of all, we talked about being a leader informally at during the Kevin Cruise when we went over the book. We talked about when you go out to eat with somebody. You go out to eat with a bunch of your buddies, and you're thinking, oh, these are guys that I work out with. Everybody's gonna want chicken breast, and then one guy orders the double burger. Then that frees everybody else to be like, oh, we're not eating healthy today. I'm in. Or, and Kevin Cruz talked about in his book, like people who eat, they kind of tend to sync up how the speed they're eating and things like that.
Yeah.
So that plays into all that. But we've talked about reflection. We've talked about self-awareness on here and emotional intelligence. And I feel like all this is really playing into that and being able to be good at deliberately practicing your leadership, that you have to have that self-awareness. Everybody's a leader to some extent. If you go, so we went to Paris, right? And we're standing there and we're waiting for the light to cross the road. When that one person steps off the curb before the light turns green for you to cross because there's no traffic coming,
right?
Watch everybody else. Other people follow that person across the street. Okay, yeah, I got it. They're supposed to wait for the green light, but at the same time, this is proving that person didn't say, "Oh, I'm going to be a leader and I'm going to walk across the street." You know what I mean? Like, but people follow them instinctively. They just go. Yeah. So that person is absolutely an informal leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and here's another good example. I thought about this as I read the next little section about self-aware leaders are more effective leaders. Self-aware. So, for instance, communication. We talk about that all the time on the show and how important communication is. If you're actually sitting down with somebody and you're having a conversation, a good point to have is you're probably getting distracted sometimes and you're thinking of something else, or you're wanting to write something down, or you want to type here, or you want to do something else. A good way as a self-aware leader is literally to repeat back some of the stuff they said to you. So it does show that you're paying attention, but also it helps them realize that you're being a good leader by listening to them. I mean, it's just something as simple as that. But sometimes what we do is
active listening.
Yeah, active listening. Exactly. But sometimes what happens is somebody's talking and we'll get so distracted and we'll by other stuff, and they may not notice it, or they may notice it, and one of two things could happen. Well, they could just keep on talking and then they could leave, or they could be probably offended or upset by the fact that they really didn't think that you were listening and that you even give a darn about anything. So, it's being, learning how to be self-aware just in small instances like that, just in conversation. You said it before, Ed. We got one mouth and two ears. Close the one mouth, listen with both ears. It's just, it comes down to stuff like that, man.
Absolutely.
So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we've also said before, if you just close your mouth and listen, you'll know twice as much. You'll know what you know and you'll know what they know, instead of, running away and interrupting and all that good stuff. But active listening, again, here we go with the Instinctive Influencers podcast and previous episodes. Communication. We've talked about communication, and that's part of this whole self-aware leader thing that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and that's what happens is when you become more self-aware in your actions, your words, your deeds. Basically, you're noticing what it is you're doing. It helps you identify those things that are strengths and those things that are weaknesses. If I'm standing in front of a formation and I'm giving them a brief of sorts, whether it be a safety brief or I'm preparing to conduct physical training with them, whatever. If I'm standing in front of it and I'm addressing the formation and I'm looking, if I'm actively looking around at their faces as I'm speaking, yes, I'm speaking and I should already kind of have something planned out in a sense of what I'm going to talk about. But when you start looking at their faces, you can engage those individuals every once in a while too by putting emphasis or by stating something that they may know about, but you're not like identifying that person. You're just kind of like in making an overall gesture about something or just talking about something. And you can look at people, you can nod at them and, kind of like, are you in agreement with me type nod? And you watch for their reactions. So that's that self-aware. And that's all about that communication we talk about. So right here, Ed, subject matter studying requires intentionally consuming material pertinent to your stretch goal. So if I know my weakness seems like a time management thing where I'm not managing it enough, I maybe need to consume more material dealing with time management. Yours, you said candor.
Yep.
Hello.
Yeah. And it even says here, this requires candor in a sense of psychological safety between the center and receiver of the feedback. I told you, but it was a strength too.
Yeah.
Which is odd.
Yeah,
but it was a strength and a weakness, and it was number one on both, which is really super strange. But
yeah, exactly. Enacting these new behaviors provides a medium for transferring and applying the new knowledge, skills, and attributes. Enacting these new behaviors. So we actually have to action them to transfer and apply the new knowledge and skill. So when I read something new or I watch a new video or I see somebody else do something, I'm learning from that. Now I have to transfer that as an apply. And that kind of pulls it from one side to the other. And it's kind of, that's that learning process. Coaching and counseling sessions with subordinates are prime opportunities for leaders to put this training into practice. That's that.
And that could be.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That could be something we practice too.
Yes.
Because everybody's not a great counselor or coach. That's an excellent, deliberate leadership practice because that's your opportunity. I used to get my soldiers to give me some feedback. Where we worked at before, we had a master sergeant who left and went to the NCO Academy. And if you ever went in his office for like a dismissal or a counseling, he would always ask at the end, so what did you think? How was it? Because he was trying to, get better at it. So that feedback that comes from that, counseling, coaching sessions are excellent opportunities, not just to develop your subordinate, but use them to develop yourself as the leader too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And think about this too. Let's just say, because you're saying about coaching and counseling. So one of the areas that I noticed, for instance, that younger Sergeant E5s and even staff sergeants, and I've seen the senior leaders do it, where when you're counseling someone, they say you should be doing blah blah blah, or you need to be doing blah blah blah. So right now I'm giving them a directive. When I'm doing their counseling, I'm giving them a directive. But a counseling, when you're counseling and coaching, you're trying to get to the core, behind whatever issues or whatever is really good that they need to sustain. It's how you word it too. For instance, instead of saying you should be doing this, I may instead say, have you ever thought about doing X, Y, and Z? And then if they say, yes, I have, or no, I haven't, or okay, now you can lead into other stuff such as, oh, well, if you have, then what were some of the outcomes that you possibly came out with, of course, of actions for that particular thing? So now you get more feedback, right? And you're listening. And you can kind of start swaying a conversation a certain way. Now, we talked about manipulation before. You don't want to manipulate the conversation so you're just getting your answer. You want to manipulate the conversation so you're getting what's best for them, not for you. Because you may think, oh, well, my answer's the best. But what if all of a sudden they start giving you these answers and it's like, wow, I didn't think about that. And you've already kind of thought about it. And you went through that. Wow, that's a good idea. Let's go back this way, right? But sometimes what happens is as leaders, we're trying to force our ideas on people during coaching and counseling instead of
yeah.
persuading by listening first.
Oh yeah. We used to have a guy who used to work in the motor pool, and when in the unit you and I were in together before the academy, he was in charge of the motor pool guys when we were in Afghanistan. But he did one thing he always said that I thought was really good is he always said when you do a counseling, it's a conversation. You know, in the military, so often we type everything out on the counsel, we print it here, sign, date, you understand, got it. But his thing was always it's a living, breathing document that you develop. So you can put your bullet points, hey, I want to talk about these things, but then as you're having the discussion, you add to it in pen. And I know a lot of people in the Army are going to say, oh, no, you can't be writing on the counseling by hand, but you can.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps with the development because now we're having a conversation and now they're getting some buy-in because they're adding to that counseling. So it was one of the things I took from him that I thought, I mean, honestly, I thought he was spot on with the living, breathing document.
And, you know, Ed, when you say that, because maybe there's listeners who don't understand what the counsel statement looks like. There's a main topic of what it's about. Then we go through the key points of the discussion. It's key points, like you're talking about. We may throw some bullets in there, but then we're going to start marking some stuff up. Then we flip that over, and then there's a plan of action. The plan of action is to action upon things talked about on the front, whether it be good, bad, indifferent, no matter what. Hey, sustain this by continuing doing this. Hey, we're going to need to improve this. This is what we came up with together. And what you said there exactly is how it's supposed to be, is when you flip that over, that really isn't, it's already supposed to be a plan of action there. That's supposed to be something that's developed between the two of you.
Yep.
And as a leader, it really is best to get the opinion of the junior to see where they are mentally, if they understand, by asking them, how do you think we're going to get to this point? What are some ideas we could enact to get to this point? What are your thoughts on this? You know, and it allows them to do some critical thinking, problem solving themselves, and also for you as a leader to understand their knowledge and understanding at the same time. So, yeah, man, that's a great point, dude.
Why, thank you, sir.
So let's get this final part, man. You want to hit us up about this final component?
Yeah, so the final component of learning and reflection begins with seeking feedback on the leader's performance. And this is where I was saying, it says requires candor and a sense of psychological safety between the sender and receiver of the feedback. So, I mean, really, if I was talking about using the counseling as a two-way thing, well, with that master sergeant we had, if he was to say, hey, how'd it go? And we'd be like, well, you were really crappy. That was disgusting. That was terrible. And then he makes it reflect somehow on my evaluation. One, I was unprofessional, so he's accurate in that. But there's a consequence to it, you know what I mean? Or if you, as Brian, went in there and he says, hey, you know, how was it? And you said, I don't even know what to say. That was not good at all. And he held that against you. That's that psychological safety we're lacking there. You need to be comfortable, but at the same time, whoever's providing that feedback, they got to be professional too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think that's a balance as well. But you want to feel like I can give, as your peer, as your subordinate, that I can give you honest feedback that's going to help. Because if not, I mean, it's not assisting us in anything. It's just going to be damaging.
Yeah, and that's where he goes into interpreting the feedback, right? So understanding how to properly interpret feedback. For instance, you remember we often reference the academy because that's kind of like that was a growth period for Ed and I together. We actually kind of grew individually and together as leaders and just as influencers and mentors and mentees and followers and all that stuff. I think that was like a big period for us in time. But I think about when we used to do, if you remember correctly, at the end of every course, they had to sit down and they had to do the command client, or they had to do well, no, I'm sorry. They did the Commandant survey or the survey,
Mm-hmm.
right, about the course. So they did this survey, and when interpreting the feedback on it, because you read many just like I did,
Yep.
we both kind of got to see a lot. And sometimes you could sense, like for instance, you could sense a particular, you didn't know who the soldier was, unless you say you were trying to confront a certain person maybe that they're talking about, whatever. But you could sense a feeling that that soldier had about a particular instructor. Maybe they just didn't like them, or they just didn't like how they went about teaching, or they didn't like some of the material they brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And it would show up in multiple questions, right? So it wouldn't be just like they answered a question about what do you think about the training of your primary instructor. They would talk about it there, but then later on they would talk, a question that says, well, what did you think overall about the course? Well, they almost repeat the same thing that they said the training of the instructor down in the whole course,
Right.
when they're not realizing you're talking about two different topics, but this person definitely had something that they wanted to say about that individual. And you can see that, when you're interpreting, you're like, okay, so obviously these are same type of bullets about the same person from about the same person, because no one's going to, very seldom do our soldiers write the same thing about the same person. They change it up. They make different things. So, but then at the same time, Ed, how many times did we see really good stuff and it seemed like the same thing being said?
I remember actually reading one where it looked like the student just copy and pasted the exact same phrase on every question.
Oh yeah. You know what? I think I know what you're talking about too. It was about like such and such instructor is the greatest ever, or something like that, and it just kept saying that.
Yeah, they're a recruiter now.
Yes, that's the exact same one I was thinking about. Yeah. Sis. Yeah, I said his name, but yeah, but that's what I'm saying though. It literally said it at every little question that was answered. It said such and such is the greatest ever, and then when again such and such is great. It's like, wow, this kid just kept writing the same thing over and over again. So,
but that's important though. So it's important to note that, because honestly, what did that assist us with? So we're looking for feedback, right? And we're talking about feedback right now. What does that accomplish when we do stuff, when people do stuff like that? Absolutely nothing, because guess what happened with that? It probably got tossed to the side because they're like, oh, this student was just trying to get it over with. And now the student may have been sincere, but it doesn't come across like that because you made a game out of it with this copy paste. So when we're giving feedback, it's important that we give feedback. And even when you don't want to give feedback on stuff like that, it's important that you're honest and just give the feedback, because nothing can change without that feedback. Nobody can develop themselves. I myself as a leader, if I ask for feedback and you can't give it to me, then how am I going to know where I need to work? How do I know my shortcomings other than my own self-assessment? And sometimes you're going to get different stuff from somebody outside. So yeah, it's important that when we do the feedback, we take it serious as well. Goes back to me saying, when you're giving feedback, it's important to be professional.
Right. Yeah. And so, with this next little sentence, I kind of agree with it, but I disagree with what he has to say here. And I'll explain why once I read it. Deliberately practicing leaders learn from their experiences quickly and develop new levels of thinking in order to achieve their stretch goal. All right. So that learn from their experiences quickly. I don't agree with that all the time, because I think sometimes you do have to have some focus in on it. But if I'm focused in over all the way over here on the right side, I'm not going to, and both eyes are always focused over on the right side, I'm not going to see everything that's going over on the left side when that's where I needed the focus. So I'm not going to learn it as quickly. But if I'm focused on the right side, and then my vision starts kind of moving to the middle, and I can focus a little bit, I can see out the parameters along with the middle, then something catches my eye over there, then I'll direct my attention over there, and then I'll quickly learn it. But if I'm constantly over here on the right side, and that comes with being constantly being observant around you, but you're not going to catch everything. I'm sorry, no one's that good.
No,
you just, yeah. So learning from experiences quickly, I agree it happens, but I don't think it happens all the time, if that makes sense.
No, it completely makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, again, when you go into feedback, another part that's I don't see in here, but I think is very important is checking your ego. like
Oh,
accepting
yeah.
it. Yeah, we talk about ego a few
Yes.
times, and that is crucial to feedback becoming
Yeah.
valuable, is being able to say, okay, maybe I am not as great as I think I am. Maybe I'm not the greatest
Yeah.
sergeant first class in the Army, but how can I become that? I can listen to this feedback and I can use it, and I can practice these things that they're telling me deliberately to
Mm-hmm.
evolve and become better.
Yeah, no, and it's funny you said that because I thought it should have perfectly fit in the last sentence where earlier about interpreting feedback entails deliberate reflection of both positive and negative outcomes without ego. That's what I wanted to add in there, without ego.
Yeah, without ego. I think we've been perfect right there.
Yeah, it would have worked perfectly for that. They take action on these new insights, and this is moving on from that experiences quickly and developing new levels of thinking. Now, I do believe we develop new levels of thinking because now where it's like, okay, I'm hypersensitive to this, so now I'm going to really pay attention to that. But they take action on these new insights and adjust their deliberate practice until they reach mastery of that skill or competency. Mastery or competency. Now, mastery can be, it can be one of those things that a lot of people don't, what is mastery? Am I master at this or that? Well, it just depends, man. You have to understand what mastery is, and it's comprehensive knowledge or skill in a subject or accomplishment. That's what mastery is. So being able to understand that part will allow you to continue on, understanding what it is you need to know as a leader to become a more developed. Competency in itself, that's no one is more competent than I. That's what I like to say. I know it's no one's more professional than I, but I like to say no one's more competent than I. There. I know it is. Competency is my watchword, yes, but sometimes I like to think of it as being said, no one is more competent than I. And the reason I say that, literally, it's because the striving to be more competent, right? It's telling myself that I am better than this. I am better than what is out there. I can do better. It's that self-talk, man. We've talked about self-talk before and where we go with it. So this guy, Erickson, his research suggests that expert-level performance requires a 10-year period of daily deliberate practice activities. A 10-year period. And earlier, and I mentioned that there's no real specific time. Well, he's suggesting. This doesn't mean that that's what it takes. Some people, it doesn't take that long. Some people, it does. But 10 years, man. You think about that.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair. So you think about the leader you were 10 years ago and the leader you are now. And if you honestly look at it, you cannot tell me that it hasn't been a significant shift.
Oh, yes, it has. I know for me it has.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's kind of fair. Yeah, we didn't realize we were practicing leadership, but
yeah,
I don't know.
It just depends, man. So basically, if you're desiring to become, the best leader you can for yourself, your family, or your organization, why not start deliberately practicing now, right? So questions for the readers. How are you practicing leadership in your organization? Do you have an answer to that at all, Ed, for you?
How am I practicing leadership in my organization? So one of the things I've been working on is, I think I might have talked about this. I have a lot of I have captains that work with me. And I look over their stuff administratively, make sure they're going to dental and stuff like that. And I struggled early with how to get to them, but I really found that I practiced the approach. Initially I wanted to be very sergeant-y and be like, hey, you need to go do dental. But then I was like, this isn't working. They're still not going. And so I tweaked that, and that turned into, and I'm just using dental as an example. There's a lot of other stuff,
right?
But it's the communication piece. So then I go in and say, hey, sir, hey, your dental is due. I need you to take care of that for me as soon as you can. I realize you're busy. So you stroke your ego a little bit too. Oh, I realize you're so busy, sir. And then they usually will take care of it at that point. If they don't, then that's when I usually go, come on, sir, you're killing me. Like, I have to brief these stats. When you were a commander, you had to brief stats, so you know what it's like to have to brief that somebody can't go to the dental, and that is usually the nail that gets them for sure. But I've practiced that communication with those that outrank me, so they don't work for me, they work with me, but I'm responsible for them administratively, and they're senior to me, so it's that I practice often.
It's funny you bring that up, Ed, because I think it's funny, like the situations you and I are each in right now, but I feel like we're going through the same type of things. Because I would say 2/3 of my formation outrank me, 2/3 easily, and
oh yeah,
you have to learn. It's no longer it's no longer that because I'm the senior ranking NCO that you're going to do it because I said so.
right.
It's no longer that. Even though I think we learned that previously, but now it's more about, okay, so how do I lead them even though they outrank me? You know? How do I get them? How do I take the horse to the trough and make them drink the water? I can't make them anymore. I got to get them. I get it. And it's funny, man, because I'm going through kind of the same things you are, and I do understand. People get tasked like crazy to do stuff, and that's understandable. And they'll lose focus or that or this, whatever. Got it. Great. But we still have to meet those particular requirements that are set for us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's awesome, man. I would have to tell you, the way I'm practicing is every time I'm learning something new, especially with you, when we learn something new together, I don't use it automatically, but sometimes I use it probably there's sometimes I use it probably the next day. And I just want to test it out and see, all right, acting this way or doing things this way or talking this way. There are sometimes that I've sat on stuff and thought about it for a couple of weeks and then tried it out. So I think that's how I've been practicing in my organization, is just taking bits and pieces that you and I learned together and trying to form it into one thing to become better. So what stretch goals do you have to become a better leader? I could say, right off the bat, mine definitely would fall into the ideas of what I was talking about earlier with crowding that calendar. That's one of the goals that I'm really like. That's more like personal,
right?
Like no one else can do it but me. No one else can do it for me. I can only do it for me. Versus, I can try to implement things that we've learned, other things we learn, but unless I get a certain reaction or certain whatever, I don't know if it worked or not. Versus if I don't do the crowded calendar, it's not going to work, period, because I didn't try to do it. But if I do it and I'm starting to see effects, then hey, yeah, I can learn from it. So that, to me, that's what I have.
Yeah, mine is kind of related because mine is more time management, and then crowd your calendar goes into that. I like to take advantage of, maximum advantage of hours in the day at work, because I don't want to take time away from my wife after work because I didn't get something done that really there was a particular spot in the day that I could have. So I really want to work on my time management piece, so there's no late night working or weekend work or none of the other stuff that takes away from my family.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah. All right, so I think this next question, though, Ed, it really revolves around the leader aspect, because it's not asking like what your goals and all this stuff. It's actually asking, how can you help others establish and pursue stretch goals? So now we're falling into that coach and mentor. We're actually, how are we helping others to do the same thing we're trying to do? And that's part of that leadership growth, that deliberate practice of leadership growth, by trying to help others establish and pursue stretch goals.
Yeah, and so I can answer this one for me. I am a co-host of the Instinctive Influencers podcast, and that's how I'm going to help others establish and pursue their stretch goals.
I think, you know what? I'm going to have to tag along to that. And I'm going to have to say that I concur to that statement, and I shall sign the block and signature.
It is now Viking law.
It's Viking law. We have put it into law. Yes. Hey, so before we kind of wrap things up, there was a few books here that they actually recommended to kind of get into to understand this a little bit more. One's Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell does a lot of different books. He's really good at. I've read Tipping Point, or I've read most of Tipping Point. Really good book. Helps you understand things and look at things differently. Another one, The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. I've actually read. I didn't read it. I audiobooked it. But Daniel Coyle actually has another one. It is called The Culture Code. And if I could recommend a book, The Talent Code I haven't even dealt with yet. So I'm definitely going to jump into that one because it says about unlocking the secret of skills in sports, art, and music and math. So, but I would tell you The Culture Code, I actually learned so much from that, and I want to go back and listen to it again because of all the different stuff that was said. I listened to most of that while I was painting our house before we sold it back in 2018, and I was listening to it the whole time, and I really got to concentrate. I was just doing mindless work, so I could really just listen and kind of process it. So not only the Talent Code, but also as a leader, I would check out The Culture Code. Really good book. Another one here. Integrative Approach to Leader Development. And I can't really see the author's name on it. But yeah, so an integrative approach to leader development. So that's another one. And then this last one is Angela Duckworth wrote Grit, the Power of Passion and Perseverance. So those are just a couple books. He also gives he gives up a couple podcasts, but really I wanted to kind of like hit upon some podcasts that Ed and I can offer up that we really think could help, especially the Instinctive Influencer audience and community. Ed, what's a good podcast you could offer?
Lead X podcast with Kevin Cruz. It's an excellent podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good. Very good. I would bounce off Lead X and I would jump right into the Jocko podcast. That's another one. The only thing though with Jocko is he does a lot of history type stuff. He does a lot of books and whatnot, and he does really good interviews with people that I've enjoyed. But he's gritty, right? He's raw. He's that he's this typical type of I love meat kind of guy, and that he's just one of those kind of people, man. I always enjoy listening to him. You got any more?
I'm gonna tell you that, especially if you're struggling with something and you're really, we had our suicide episode, and if you just feel like you want to give up, I gotta tell you the Team Never Quit podcast with Mr. Lone Survivor Marcus Luttrell. The guests, the stories are amazing. He recently had JJ Watt on, and it was it was a short episode, but it was pretty good. I have a different look at old JJ Watt now. Like, you're talking about a guy back to back seasons. He had season ending surgery, his back, he broke his leg. Both of them were fluke things. He talks about how he just knew he's coming back, and all the stuff he's done for Houston after the hurricanes in Houston. And he's not a Houston native, so good interview. But everything on Jocko was great too. But on Team Never Quit, yeah, if you're having a struggle and you just feel like I can't take it, I have to give up, whatever it is, even if it's a matter of I'm not doing this no more, I quit this job. Listen to that. Listen to some of the stories, and hopefully you'll find some inspiration. But I love that podcast.
Yeah, I do. I enjoy that one also. I would throw on those three that we just threw out there another one that I've learned to enjoy. Now you got to watch the language sometimes, because sometimes they have different people on and language gets crazy. But I enjoy the Tim Ferriss show. I really do. He has a lot to say. It's like he's very inquisitive about things. It's like he's always searching for answers to provide answers to others. And I like his format about how he goes into things to try to. Now, I do sometimes I feel like sometimes he kind of sounds arrogant, but I think that's just him. right? I don't think he's a bad person at all. I actually think he means completely well, and he really wants to do better for people. It's just sometimes his voice, that's what his voice sounds like to me.
Right.
But, I'm just one of, whatever. I mean, but I think that's another really good one to kind of, get after and listen to. And it's not like most of these ones, most of them, it's not like you have to listen in succession. You can like pick and choose throughout. Now, like I would tell you, like for instance, Jocko. Sometimes like he did a couple where he did a back-to-back interviews with people, and it'd be best if you listen the first one, next one, you know what I'm saying? But you can figure that out by just reading the title of it, Team Never Quit. They don't usually do that at all, do they?
No, and their times really, one episode might be an hour, the next episode might be 2.5. So
yeah. Oh yeah, and like some of them like sporadically just release, and you're like, oh, they got another one out. So they don't sit on a time schedule.
No, and like I said, I enjoy them. I love Marcus's individual story, and then the other thing, they'll have listeners write in about their never quit moment, and if they read them on the air. Sometimes they'll have them come in the studio and talk to them, and it's just an inspirational podcast. So
It is. Yeah, and I think and that's why I wanted to bring up a few that we listen to, because I feel like we've taken a lot from them. Like we've learned a lot, and we've been able to share even more through what we've learned from them. I'll tell you, Ed, this is it's been an interesting one. It was a good read. I enjoyed it, but we got to give out a task, man. We got to something's got to be done here.
I mean, we did ask 3 questions. I don't know if you have something in mind, but we asked 3 questions and we answered them.
Yeah. You know what? I think we should just give them one of those questions, don't you?
Yeah, why not? I mean, we answered them for them. We gave them the way to go.
Yeah. So all of you should kind of understand what we meant by stretch goals, and believe me, it's really working on that weakness and how you stretch it out. What stretch goals do you have to become a better leader? What stretch goals do you have to become a better leader? And let us know what stretch goals you think maybe you need to work on to help become a better leader. And that's your task for this episode 42. Man, we're getting close. We're getting close to that time.
I know. 42.
Yeah. Episode 50 is right around the corner, Ed. And with that, episode 50 is going to be that Q&A show. So we're going to be recording it really soon from the time this. So when this comes out, it'll be, we'll literally be right on top of recording it. So obviously we're going to be posting more on Facebook and whatnot to get more people, solicit more questions and whatnot. But if you have something you want to bring up to Ed or I, you can send us a personal message. Just directly message us. Or if you just want to post something on the Instinctive Influencers podcast closed book page, Facebook page, you can type in 101 Influence in your search bar. Go to that page. It should be the very first one, Instinctive Influencers podcast. And then you're going to hit visit group, answer some questions, and then hopefully we can get to it and approve it really quick. And from that point on, just go in and search for different tasks and whatnot, or just whatever it is that you're looking for. And if it's to offer up a couple questions, or offer up one question. But Q&A. So that you're probably wondering, well, what do I Q&A? Well, that's what I would tell you. Q&A could be anything. It could be, hey, what was one of your most influential times when you were 5 years old, and why is it? Do you think it relates to what you do now, type thing? Something. Anything, you come up with it. So I would tell you, reach out to us, let us know, because we would love to really hit upon what it is you have. And if you don't want us to mention who you are or anything like that, that's totally cool. We'll make sure we don't. Also, find us on Instagram, Facebook. We said Facebook earlier. Instagram, Twitter, and just LinkedIn. I really like that. That's a great resource if you want to look for more material to help you develop, your stretch goals. I would definitely tell you go there, because there's lots of material to help you become better. But with that, we also have the Instinctive Influencers webpage. Give it a shot. Go check us out. Look at those pictures on there, and you can also listen to the show on there, along with on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. And if you could, if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, man. or gal, whoever's listening,
Yeah.
leave us a rating. Just leave us a rating because we'd like to know how we're doing, okay? And also it helps out with the show, and that's it. Just kind of helps things move along. With that, Ed, what do you got, my man?
Another great episode, Brian. Another good, great episode. So I got a quote I'm going to read to you. It's from the legendary Rihanna. It's nice to look back on your life and see things as lessons and not regrets. And I said it because it's good to look back on your life and look back on your leadership lessons and then learn from them and move forward and keep practicing deliberate leadership.
Absolutely, man. That's great. Great point. Don't regret it. Just work forward off of it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, with that, I am Brian.
I am Ed.
And this has been the Instinctive Influencers podcast. We thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a great day.